Ever since Dyne arrows were released, bows have become meta for the ranged combat style, and with the release of the tier 95 bow, the Bow of the Last Guardian, that only became more prevalent. The first thought that comes to most everyone's mind is, where am I going to get my adrenaline without HYDRIX bolts? Well, I may just have a decent solution for you bow campers out there. I'm Rheyo, and welcome back to Reckless Ranger. Before we get started, make sure to check the video description for the series playlist, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to get notified of new episode releases. I've heard this concern from many players, and through my experience, I've noticed that adrenaline can be lacking at times. Despite the loss of adrenaline gain though, I've been able to excel in the content I use ranged for because the Elder God arrows are just that powerful. I've really been getting comfortable in my current state, so I've been searching for ways to increase my DPS within the content that I do regularly, which lately has been Zamorak, Zuk, Kerapac, and in the extremely rare occurrence I do group PVM, Solak. Zamorak in particular is what caused me to incorporate this into my gameplay. There's a lot of full adrenaline resets through charging the edicts throughout the fight, and as I've gotten more comfortable with the encounter, the more flexible I've become with trying new things. In P7, you have an extremely small window to burst Zamorak for a minimum of 100,000 HP, which scales with the enrage that you're doing. Without Bow of the Last Guardian, a ranged player's best known burst ability is the Dark Bow EOF due to how strong it hits without a cooldown. The problem, as we all know, is that in terms of adrenaline, it's extremely expensive to use. To manage this, many players will use a HYDRIX switch whenever they use Rheyo for the chance of regaining a mass amount of adrenaline. But in this video, we'll be going over a different method that should supplement you with plenty of adrenaline for your burst, without the need to switch weapons or ammunition style. We'll be going over the use of Incendiary shot, using the Deathspore arrow effect. So if you don't use Deathspore arrows or you're not totally sure how they work, essentially what happens is whenever you have them equipped, every single crit strike that you have will give you a stack of feasting spores. Once you reach 5 stacks, the next ability that uses adrenaline that you use will be completely free. This can be an ultimate or a threshold. Once you hit those 5 stacks, you essentially want to use Death Swiftness, and then you can use Incendiary shot. And when you use Incendiary shot, for the next 30 seconds, all critical strikes that you do will give you 10% adrenaline. So things like Rheyo hits up to 7 times, using it will give 8% adrenaline. And then if all 7 of those hits do a crit, then you will get an extra 70% adrenaline. This always going to happen? Chances are not, but there's been plenty of times where I've shot up from 50% adrenaline all the way to 100% adrenaline. And that is very, very, very powerful. So I'm near 100% adrenaline. What I'm going to do is, if you have Grimoire, I highly suggest that you use Grimoire because this makes this a lot more consistent for both building the stacks of feasting spores as well as getting the bonus adrenaline from critting after you have the Incendiary shot buff on your bar. So if you do, go ahead and activate it, and then you want to build up to 5 stacks of feasting spores. Then once you hit 5 stacks, you want to use Greater Death Swiftness, Incendiary shot, and then what you can do after this, you can just build up adrenaline with Rheyo and any sort of critical strikes. And your thresholds, you can pretty much rely on being free or giving you more adrenaline. So I used rapid fire at around 70% and I ended up with 90% afterwards. So now I want to show this in an actual 100% Zamorak kill, just so you can see how strong this actually is. As I mentioned earlier, in Zamorak you have a very small window to burst him down by about 100,000 HP, which will be higher if you do higher enrages. And to do all that damage, you want to be able to fit in a Dark Bow spec because of how strong it hits. Another reason why I want to be able to get the Dark Bow spec is because I've swapped over to using an Inspiration aura for a couple reasons. The Inspiration aura doesn't give me the defense reduction of Reckless, which is very important for Zamorak because the big bomb does a lot of damage, and this makes it a lot more survivable. And the amount of adrenaline that you're gaining from Inspiration makes it so you can use abilities a lot more frequently. So that only helps to buff up this exact method. So as I'm going into the final phase of Zamorak, my adrenaline will recharge. I will use Deadshot, and then I will finish off by doing a rapid fire or finishing off my stacks. If I have a decent bit of health left, I will finish off by doing a rapid fire because I know for a fact I'm going to get back to 100% adrenaline. As the cutscene's coming to a close, I will use Natural Instinct and swap over to my Deathspore, Target Cycle, Vuln Bomb, and Rheyo the minion, Bleed, and then Snapshot if I'm not at 5 stacks of spores. After the minion's dead, I will get up to 5 stacks, do a DS, instantly do an Incendiary shot, and then start attacking the runes. I want to burst the runes down as quick as possible because the longer they charge, the more damage it does. But on these runes, I want to make sure that I'm using thresholds to get them down as quick. as possible, and that's going to use a lot of adrenaline. So having this crit buff will basically make it so Gricko reliably recharges my adrenaline to 100 almost every single time. And having all of that adrenaline will allow me to go into an SGB, Shatter, Dark Bow, and then Snapshot to finish Zamorak off. This method is still useful even if you don't use a Grimoire or the Deathspore arrows. You can just use Incendiary Shot. There are a couple of bosses that have an adrenaline reset mechanic, namely Zamorak and Kerapac, where you can intuitively use Incendiary Shot and still get a lot of benefit from it and save yourself some time on your kill times. So since we already looked at Zamorak with using Grimoire and the Deathspore arrows, let's just take a look at a Kerapac kill that I did earlier today without the use of Grimoire or the Deathspore arrows and just used Incendiary Shot. If you've seen my previous video where I used the Bic Arrow build, I essentially camp Soul Split, use the Vampirism Aura, Reaver, Bic Arrows, and Cinderbanes, and I just do a load of poison damage and it phases Kerapac in a good amount of time. My previous PB on this that I remember posting is about a 519. Using that method, plus changing to a Wen book and using the Incendiary Shot, I was able to get this down to a 434. Which is a massive improvement. I think that is a little bit more to do with just my overall improvement of my playstyle, but Incendiary Shot definitely shaved a lot of time off my P4 rotation as well as my P2. So you can see here that I'm phasing into phase 2. I will get ready for the warp time to come up. I will warp time, and then I will DS. I will use 3 basics. And then I will Limitless and use Snapshot. And then on the last tick, I will use Rapid Fire and move on to Kerapac for the first spec. And on the last second of Rapid Fire, I will use Incendiary Shot. And then I'll use a basic and then Gricko. You always want to make sure that you use a basic before you use Gricko after using Incendiary Shot because the buff does not go on your buff bar right away. So you don't want to miss out on the opportunity to gain a lot of adrenaline using Gricko. After this, I just continue on using my abilities as normal. And by the time that Kerapac finishes his final jump, without stalling him at all, or at least barely stalling him at all, he is already phased. Now let's take a look at this into P4. So as I'm going through P4, I start it the same way. I will Warp Time and Death Swiftness, go to the few other clones and just build up the Icy Chill stacks, and then I will go on to the first clone. And then after I finish my Rapid Fire, I will start off with an Incendiary Shot on the first clone, and then I'll start working on the second clone. So what this allows me to do is just get into those thresholds a lot sooner. On top of being able to get into the thresholds and downing the second clone a lot quicker, I'm able to start the third clone reliably with 100% adrenaline, so it'll allow me to go right into a Warp Time and DS. Doing this sets me up very strong for this phase and gives me a much safer P4 to deal with Kerapac. Incendiary Shot might be a little bit daunting to use, because if you think that you are using 100% adrenaline and you're not using HYDRIX bolts, then you're kind of wondering, where am I going to get my adrenaline back from? Crits aren't guaranteed, so it's not guaranteed that I'll have my adrenaline. On the same note, HYDRIX bolt procs are not guaranteed either. This is just another way to benefit from having a similar effect without having to bring a whole new weapon set or a whole different ammunition type. I've only recently started using the Incendiary Shot method, and it's been very, very fruitful for me in terms of having a stronger burst. I don't always use it for every little bit of bossing that I do. I use it when it makes sense. So specifically at Zamorak and Kerapac, because your adrenaline resets so often when you're using Warp Time at Kerapac or whenever you charge an Edict at Zamorak, it is just very beneficial. Zamorak also has the Edict power that will give you more adrenaline as the fight progresses if you charge the first Edict earlier on. All of that plays a part in how much adrenaline you regain throughout this method or how viable this method becomes. There are other niche effects that you could benefit from using the Incendiary Shot when it comes to pre-stacking or pre-casting your Incendiary Shot buff before you actually take on a boss encounter. You could use this in speed kills, you can use this in a lot of other things that I'm currently not doing, but I do have a couple of friends in game that will use this sort of method to get faster boss times or instant boss times at lower tier bosses like God Wars Dungeon 1 or 2. Is this required? No, it is not. Is it very sweaty though? No, it's also not very sweaty. It is just another way of using your abilities and giving you a little bit of variety to your gameplay. personally enjoyed it. It's been very beneficial to me. So I'm going to try and see where else I can fit this into my rotation and see if I can get more kills per hour. Now I know this is a little bit of a different pace for my series videos. Normally they're unscripted, but this one is very scripted. And that is because, as I mentioned in probably the past 3 or 4 episodes, I am on the longest grind of this series. So there is just a lot of similar things that I'm doing in game, but I want to post updates on where I'm at. I currently have the top bow piece and the bowstring of the Bow of the Last Guardian, and I'm working on the last amount of funds for the bottom piece of the bow. I was very fortunate to get some Vestments of Havoc robe bottoms for the log of Zamorak, as well as boosting my coin pouch up to about 1 bill. They haven't sold yet, but once they sell, I'll be about 1.5 bill to the last bow piece. Hopefully this grind can come to an end soon, but for now, here's to another week of grinding Zami. If you guys enjoyed this episode, definitely make sure to leave a like on the video or share it with a friend. This series has been such a joy to do. It's been very fun to improve all the way from dual chaotic lucky crossbows all the way to where I'm at right now to getting the best in slot range weapon in the game. I still have a tiny bit of grinding left to do, but as you know, I do have another series in mind for those of you that have been watching my streams or just talking to me in game. There's not really much secret to it. I'm pretty sure you all can guess what the next series is going to be, but I'm going to wait a little bit till I announce it. I have the name planned. I've had it planned since the beginning of my first series, so I'm really excited to get started on that sooner rather than later. But to keep up with all the progress and all of the updates, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join my Discord. That way you can get notified of any new video releases as well as any streams when I go live. Also follow me over on Twitch. I do a majority of my progress on stream, so come and hang out and interact with me while I do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Rheyo, and I'll see you next time. Take care.